Hi everyone, we're here with Holly Interlandi, the writer of Last Son, a
Hello.
comic, a comic by published by Black Max Studios with art in the first three issues by Sally Cantirino and in the last one by Natalie Jackson, and I think the letters of the last one are by DC Hopkins.
Yes.
And yeah, and so this book that is has like three or four like really big issues. You're gonna get a lot of pages out of it. It's like a big comic, and it has a story that is around a band that is called Ecstasy, and has four members that we're gonna talk. I think we're gonna talk a little bit about each one of them today. So it's Nikki, Dre, Alex, and Charlie. And so the book is about a lot of things. A big trigger warning at the beginning that is it deals with suicide in its main themes and some of its characters, and it also deals with some other mental health issues, addiction, and some other things that if you're not feeling like to watch talk about the stuff, this stuff is gonna come up sometime in the life. And yeah, and also the book is like about Nikki as kind of main character. Also, although there's a lot of Dre there, we'll talk about why these two are very central to the book, and it kind of explores the childhood of Nikki and his father committing suicide and how that affects him and how that plays into like the music of the band, the how ecstasy is born and what is born of. So first of all, the first question I want to ask you, and we will get into some of these things. So if someone is confused about like the themes of the book, they're gonna come up. We're gonna talk about all the narrative bits. But the first thing is like, I know you started to write this when you were 19, and so this is like a very important idea for you, I imagine. So I want to
That was
ask.
20 years ago. For those of you who don't, who don't know, it's been 20 years of trying to get this story to happen. So
Yeah, and the first issue published in 2017, if I'm not
17,
wrong,
yeah, and it's
and the last issue was this summer, and you
yeah.
can get all of them in Comixology and the Blast Mask website and etc. And so I want to ask you like how different is what is now the comic from the idea you have when you were 19, and also what inspired you that idea, and if what inspired is similar to what is inspiring it now.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, when I wrote it, I was a young thing, very passionate about a bunch of certain rock bands, certain musicians. That was like how I sort of lived vicariously through them. I could never actually play instruments. I tried, but I was not good at it, and I didn't have the discipline. So I just like, okay, I'll just write about music instead. But I was very young, and it was the story originally came from enthusiasm, kind of like a young person's enthusiasm for rock and roll, and and big epic stories of rock bands. And actually, I had a dream when I was like 19. I dreamt of one of my favorite musicians. We were watching old concert footage, kind of the kind of thing that I would do in my college dorm room, just watch old concert footage of rock bands. And in the dream, after we were finished watching all the footage, he got really angry and destroyed all of the tapes and CDs and posters and everything like that in the dream. And so I woke up and I was like, that was pretty powerful, like I'll have to write a story about that. But there's no point to memorabilia. There's no point in nostalgia unless there's actually the story there of former glory. So I was like, okay, wow, I guess I want to write a novel now. And I never thought I would write novels. I was always a short story writer. So the suicide thing and all the addiction and all of the the drama, that was all initially inspired by outside elements, like rock stars. Like later on I can tell you like the exact bands, like the aesthetics that I was going for. But
Yes.
when I wrote it, I had not had any personal experience with those things. I was just getting the influence from like the larger than life bands that I was following. And um, since then, I've had some, personal experience with suicide. My sister committed suicide not long after I finished the book, and so now I sort of, it became more about those issues and less about the larger than life rock stars than it was at the beginning. And I also realized that when I wrote that, I get really annoyed that the legendary ones are always the ones who die, and that they're the celebrated musicians. Like, oh my God, he killed himself when he was 25, and now he's a legend. And it's like, okay, but what about the people who don't die? What about the people who keep going or decide not to succumb to that? Because I think that's much more inspiring, personally, than somebody who does, succumb to whatever pressures. And so I'm like, okay, well, I want to write a story about the one that lived, essentially, and the one that kept going despite it all, because I think that there's not a lot of that. A lot of rock star stories are about, the one that died, or I mean, think about bands like, I don't know, think about Nirvana or whatever. Like if Kurt Cobain were still around now, like an old fart, balding, hanging out with his daughter, like would we still be going, oh my God, Nirvana is so legendary, like, and people have a fear of seeing their idols get old. So yeah, I was really intent on telling a story about beating suicide and living rather than succumbing to it and dying, if that makes sense.
Yeah, actually, I think I'm gonna pick this point up later, because like the last time I reread the last issue, I really, really felt that message, like more than the other times. I don't know why, but it really stuck to me. Like it is kind of a book about like deciding to live despite having death constantly present, and that's kind of what I got. But I'm gonna pick it up later when we go to the details of why Nikki has death constantly present.
Right.
So I want to ask you about some of the inspirations, the bands, because like I think, okay, so like the music that appears in the comic, I don't know if any of those songs you try to make songs out of them. You told me you weren't a musician, so I imagine you didn't try to make songs out of them. But
I mean,
I've
tried to ask other people who are musicians to help me out with that, but that's kind of a long story. It's obviously everything involving this book is a long story because it's 20 years old. So, the two bands that I was really, really, really into and listening to when I first wrote it were one, X Japan. It was a Japanese thrash metal band. All very, very larger than life, very glammy, and a lot of the story arc and the saga sort of came from them. And the other band is the Manic Street Preachers, who are a Welsh rock band who sort of their early days, like the aesthetic of Ecstasy was sort of based on their early days, and like when Nikki and Richie would like pile on like gobs of eyeliner and like just dress in like crazy, like early 90s stuff. So those are the two bands I was really listening to when I first wrote it. But when I hear Ecstasy in my head, I don't hear either of those bands. Nikki has a different voice to me. And I've actually discovered a band about 15 years ago that to me sounded exactly like Ecstasy. And so whenever I want to listen to Ecstasy in my head, I listen to this band, and they're great. Like their singer is awesome. It's a British band called In Me, and their singer's named Dave, and he's awesome. And I've actually talked to them about like like I thought I'd get Dave to like write some music, and he sent me some demos and stuff. But I mean, it's every time that they put an album out, I'm just like, yes, like this is ecstasy. This is the sound.
Wow.
So if you want to hear what ecstasy sounds like in my head, um, I'd recommend going on Spotify or YouTube or something, and their latest album is called Jumpstart Hope. Just listen to the first track, Blood Orange Lake. That's it right there. So I know it's different for everybody, but that's what it is for me.
It makes sense because like each of the issues has a mixtape, a kind of a mixtape in the back where you
Yeah,
can like listen to what the issue sounds like, and I kind of like it a lot. The Imi song. I didn't like got into them like deeply after that. I just listened to the mixtape, but yeah,
yeah.
I get what you're saying. So
Well, yeah, and the song that I put in the mixtape, the Raindrops on Stones, that's
yes,
that's the one that I was like, wow, yeah, this is definitely Nikki singing here in my head. So yeah. So yeah, it's sort of developed over time, but it's always had an element of glam. It's always had an element of almost metal, like screamy,
yes.
like it's not acoustic folk rock. It's definitely hard rock. Um,
Yeah, I think that kind of like the good thing that the music isn't actually there is that people can like drop a lot of them into what they hear.
yeah,
Because for example, I pick up all of these clues, but for some reason, my mind, maybe it's because my personal taste, keep going back to like bands that are not exactly rock and roll, but took a lot of inspiration, like Pixies or throwing music or stuff like that. And I don't
yeah,
know why. Maybe because of the weird part of it. I was like, this must sound weird in some ways. So maybe it's because of my personal taste, but I
yeah.
pick
No,
a lot
Pixies
of
is
that.
great. Yeah, that's a good one, especially because of the time period that they were
Yeah,
putting out
th-
music.
yeah. I was thinking a lot like this should start sometime in 1983, 84, 85. So it should be, and it should not be exactly rock and roll, but kind of yeah,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I've heard all sorts of things. I mean, I talk to people who say they heard. Like one of my friends says he hears Stone Temple Pilots when he reads it. Somebody else, well, one of my other friends who's actually an ex Japan and Mannix fan said that early Manic Street Preachers were what he hears, like
Hmm.
sort of that glam guitar sound. So and I kind of I think that's ultimately why I decided not to like really pursue putting out music with it, because I wanted everybody to hear that awesome band in their head that they heard,
um,
like I didn't want to sort of override that for them, because we all have that band that just inspires us and we're just like, oh my god, this is so good. And so I didn't want to like I didn't want to overwrite that for anybody while they were reading the book. Like I wanted them to be able to come up with what the band sounded like. So that's ultimately why I decided, even though I wrote all the lyrics, I decided not to release music alongside it, because I wanted it to be like the universal experience for people. If you know,
yeah, that makes total sense.
yeah,
I think it's part of the great part of the book that you can like project how you feel the music feels.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
And that's how I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be universal. I didn't want this to be just just this one story. Like I wanted people to feel what I felt when I was 19, 20 years old and just getting so inspired by these bands, and that band is different for everybody. So ecstasy can be whatever it means to you. Like just like the side characters that I put into the story, like Julian and James and Nora. All these characters, ecstasy affects their lives in different ways. However, whatever effect that happens to be, even if it's no effect, like Jennifer, the barista at the coffee shop, who like has no idea who
yes,
they are and doesn't care. Like, but I wanted to show that universality. Like everybody has their own view, and they each take what ecstasy means to them, and that's what I wanted readers to do too. So
yeah. I think these side characters are a great touch because they let you like breathe a little bit from the story. When Julian is going with his sister, I don't remember the name of the sister, but
Julian,
like they
Oh wow, I don't remember the name of the sister right now
Christy?
either.
Christy? I don't know.
Christy, that was it. Christy.
Yes.
Yeah.
When they're going to the concert, it's like you get a breath from the heavier dance of the story and you focus on the experience of what it is like to be a fan of this band that feels really, really human while you read the story, that feel really personal and human. And for some moment you're like, well, to some people they're just like a band that they flip out over. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. That was definitely the goal. Like I wanted to bring it like, yeah, you can't have this larger than life, rock star story, but when you bring it down to the bottom, the people who buy the records are the ones who, make the stories. So yeah.
that's great. Okay, so I think we can talk a little bit more about the characters. I think
Okay.
we could like focus a little bit on each one of them, although I don't know if we're gonna be able to separate like Nikki from Dre, because their stories are like
It's fine.
yeah.
Entwined,
But
yes.
there's one thing that spoilers for people watching. There's one thing that I really like about this book is that it tackles some of the okay, so the queer dance that's a lot of this music has rock and roll and the music that came after it, and especially in the late 80s and early 90s, there's a lot of queerness that is mostly subtextual. This book takes it to the text because these two boys are kind of in love, like they're in love, but they won't like manage it well.
Well, yeah,
And
exactly. It's also during the time period when you were either gay or you were not gay. Like they're like, and I think
yes,
that's also a difference from when I wrote it 20 years ago to now. Like, it's evolved to the where you can say queer, the
hmm,
queer characters and use that term, and people know what you're talking about. And whereas, even when I wrote it, people were like, okay, you're either gay or straight. Like there's nothing in between. And I thought it was important, at least for me, to tell a story about people who may not know what's going on, or
yes,
maybe they're in between, or maybe, maybe it's like, well, I'm not really sexually attracted to this gender, but I like this person a lot. So I wanted to, explore that in a way that was not so black and white.
yeah. I feel like both characters, even if they don't say it, feel like bisexual. Like really, it's something that fits both Dre and Nikki. Even if, like as you said, it's not the book adapts to the language of the era it's talking about. So
Mhm.
it's normal that they both are struggling with what is this that they feel for each other. And also, I feel there's a lot of like Nikki relies a lot emotionally on Dre. I feel like some of the strengths of the story is how Nikki learns to like uh, make some sense of his life. And for a long time in the book, this sense of his life is like the bands and more specifically his relationship with Dre. Like he relies a lot, even you could say like depends on Dre. And I feel like it's a great like contrast of the book to make this a sense of like both of them in bed, like talking and they're not sleeping. And they talk about certain like a lot of things that they're going through their heads and like mostly about how they're very different in how they feel about life. And then the bands scenes, no, like the scenarios with the people shouting and etc. Like it's really putting the intimate in one way and the like public image of them in the other. And yeah, I want to ask you like what's the inspiration for this relationship, because like I was like really like happy with how this relationship developed, even if it didn't develop happy. I personally I personally was like glad to see that it was like explicitly acknowledged, especially after the first issue. I ended the first issue with like, oh, but I want this explicitly acknowledged. And when the second issue finished, I was like, this is great because it's like it's taking its time to arrive there, but it's building something that feels true. So like, where did you get that?
Yeah, wow. A lot of it is I'm like going back to my like 19-year-old head here. it came from a lot of places. Like I wanted to explore like an intense relationship that wasn't about sex. You know, like when people tell stories, it's like, oh, this is about a relationship. Like there's almost always like some kind of sexual element there, and I think there's a lot more to explore in like really intense friendships and relationships and stuff that's not about that.
Yes.
Also, when like I said, the two bands that inspired it when I was writing Extra Pan and Manic Street Preachers, both of them had tragedies happen in the bands. For those of you who don't know, the Manics, their lyricist and then guitarist Richie disappeared one day. He was never found in 1995, I believe, and he hasn't come back. And then for Extra Pan, it was they played their last live, and then their lead guitar player Hide committed suicide about 6 months after they broke up. So there were those two tragedies that I was pulling from. And when it came to Nikki and Dre, I really wanted to come up with a story where you can see both sides of how the relationship is developing. Like I didn't want any bad guys in this scenario. I didn't want to be like, oh, this guy's terrible to Nikki, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I want it to be like, well, real relationships, you know, they fall apart, not because one of the people is evil, but because there are things there are clashes that happen, you know, like Nikki's obsessed with, you know, the band and fulfilling his dream. And so he gets so high up in that he forgets, you know, who he is, and he forgets what really matters around him. And Dre is, you know, the one who's always grounded him, and he's the one who, you know, he's the one who feels uncomfortable when Nikki starts doing all the rock star stuff, like, you know, sleeping with groupies and taking ecstasy at a show, and Dre's like, dude, whoa, this isn't you, you know. But Nikki doesn't see that. So I think that was another thing I wanted to do was really make it a relationship that falls apart in a way that doesn't make either of them the bad guy, so to speak. So yeah, the tragedies, the non-sexual stuff. Also, you know, it can't be easy to like have the expectation, you know, of to be one way, like, you know, because everybody grows up with the expectation that you have to be heterosexual and that you have to, you know, fall in love with somebody of the opposite sex and blah blah blah. So for Nikki, I think it was especially difficult for him to like acknowledge that it's like the person he fell in love with wasn't, you know, is not a woman. Like that's kind of like blows his mind. He's like, what? And I think that should be, I want to say normalized, because that would be shitty, because normal is boring. But I think it should be explored more, because, you know, everyone's like, oh, you know, when you have a relationship with somebody or when you fall in love with somebody, it's not about sex. It's like, well, if it's not about sex, then, you know, why are we so obsessed with this weird heteronormativity thing?
Yeah.
And I was also having my own gender identity issues at the time. I now consider myself non-binary, but when I wrote the book, that didn't exist. when I wrote the book, that wasn't an option.
Yes.
You know, you either had to be what you were born as, or you had to, like, you know, have a sex change, as it was called back then. And this was just 20 years ago. Like, it's changed so much, and now I can be like, okay, this is me. This is my gender. This is my genderless self, and I can be okay with that. But when I wrote it, that wasn't a thing. But I see now that a lot of where that came from was my own, like, sort of inner turmoil of, like, being like, why do I have nothing in common with women? Or like, why do I not feel like this is right for me? Or and it's really hard to exist in society like that when you don't feel, because when you're a teenager and even when you're in college, you just want to be like everybody else. You know, you want to fit in, you want to feel like you know, you're you're a regular person, and you don't want to feel like there's something inherently different or wrong with you. Obviously that develops as, you know, you get older, and you get usually you get to be a little bit more accepting of your weirdness, as I have been. But when you're young, it's really hard to deal with. So that's another place that the relationship came from, was my own weird gender discomfort.
Yeah, I can definitely feel some of that, Nikki. Like I really, really identify with this character, and I don't tend to identify with boy or main characters. Like I don't, I tend to find it harder.
Mm-hmm.
So like I really, really like see like some of the stuff that comes up in the book, like the eyeliner thing that comes up like 3 times. Like
Yeah.
it's weird that someone makes a comment about his eyeliner 3 times. I was like, this is something like, because if you were like doing it like, I don't know, Motley Crue style, nobody would comment in on it like 3 times. So for me, it's like this is something deeper, because like you like it's something that comes up out of him. So like I definitely raise Nikki as some kind of non-binary. That's kind of my takeaway from the book.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, yeah, that makes total sense.
okay, I have the confirmation from the author now. So
Well, I mean, you know, I was basically, I wanted to create a character that was not, you know, your typical hetero dude, bro.
yeah.
And so, you know, obviously the gender play comes into that. So
So yeah. Now that we're
I
talking
mean, the
about
eyeliner
oh
itself. Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
No, no, no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You're
I
mentioning the
always want
eyeliner
to hear.
itself, which I sort of became a like a representation of his his rock star personality. When he puts on the eyeliner, all of a sudden he's this larger than life persona in his head, and then when he washes it off, he's just Nicky again. So
Yeah.
and the same with the sunglasses. Actually, I don't know if you noticed, but he takes to wearing sunglasses later on in their career, like all the time, just whenever, like indoors, outdoors, and he tends to take the sunglasses off when he feels more connected to people and down to earth. So that was another like symbolic thing that sort of arose. I didn't actually go into the book expecting that kind of symbolism, because if you go into a story with like big symbols in your head, it ends up being really obnoxious and allegorical and hitting you over the head with some like freaking scarlet letter stuff. I'm just like, no. So you said I had the story, so I just waited for those symbols to develop, and they ended up being like the eyeliner and the sunglasses, and I mean, there's some other stuff in there too, like the culture slut, the
Hmm.
restaurant that they go to,
Yes.
just all sorts of stuff. So yeah, that's sort of where the eyeliner came in. And it's obviously a gendered thing too, you know. I mean, glam rock, you know, that's one of the few places back then in the early 90s, late 80s that it was acceptable for dudes to wear eyeliner, like if they're on
Yes.
stage and they're being a rock star. So even if maybe Nicky wanted to wear it in his private life, it wasn't really something that was embraced. Um,
Hmm.
and so the rock star thing is also sort of an excuse. Like it's like, oh, I'm a rock star now. I can do all this weird stuff. I can wear makeup, you know.
Yes. Yes,
So
I absolutely read it like that, because like the necessity of him to explain again and again why
yeah,
he can actually wear eyeliner felt really, really much like I really want to wear eyeliner, but I really, really need an excuse for that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and
exactly.
I like that, because I feel like that's really relatable for people that have the same experience. So like I really like that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks. I obviously I've been with these characters for 20 years, so it's
You know,
refining them has been one of my great joys in life, and they always, you know, um, you know, developing their expression, because I didn't, you know, I wrote the novel when I was 19, but the comic book, I didn't actually start turning into a script until like 2015, and it was a lot more work than I thought. Like I was, I was like naively like, oh, the story's written. I'll just adapt it to comics and it'll be easy. And it's like, no, it's not easy.
Yeah, that's not easy.
Well,
So,
and I wanted to, and I found myself like having to cut all of these lines of prose that I was totally in love with, because I was like, no, comics are a different medium. You don't get as many words. So I was like, cut, like, and in the original novel, another interesting tidbit, in the original novel, Alex is a boy.
oh, I like the chains.
Yeah, and I didn't, and that I realized, like, going along with the adaptation, I was like, do I really want to write a story about a band full of white men, like a bunch of white men? Like it felt a little bit something that didn't occur to me when I was in college. It occurred to me when I was adapting it. So I was like, maybe I should flip the switch a little bit. And that actually ended up working a lot better, I think, than the character of Alex in the book.
Yes. I mean, I don't know the book, but it worked a lot in the comic.
Yeah. Well, and it sort of turned into because in the book, the characters pretty much stayed the same. In the book, Alex is, pretty timid and doesn't speak up for himself, and needs to learn that that he has a voice, and he has like influence and a presence, and that's sort of when I turned Alex into a girl. That sort of it became more of a like, you gotta stand up for yourself when you're the only
Yes.
girl in the band, and you have to have a really strong personality to to be on stage with a bunch of dudes. And so that's why spoiler, but that's why the climax of her arc is getting up in front of people by herself and being like, hey, I am somebody. I'm not just like the background, So that was an interesting. Alex had an interesting journey, actually.
Yeah, we can like talk about Alice since you bring her up. Like, I really like this character. She didn't get like a lot of time to like the same amount of like development that Nikki and Dre got, but I really like that she kind of you can feel that she has like a lot of like ideas and a lot of like things she wants to put on the wall and a lot of like things she wants to express, but it's constantly like put down by other people not wanting to do that. And I feel like there's a moment of the book in which like this comes up really beautiful, in which she got a letter from a little girl that says that now she wants to play music, and she's like so proud of that. And I feel like she's kind of saw herself in like this girl that is like, I don't know if I can play music. Like I kind of felt like some type of, I have felt like that in the past there. And I really, really like that, because I feel like that goes very well with her arc and with how in the end it's like, yes, it's like really putting herself in like expressing how she feels about Charlie, which we'll get to Charlie in a moment.
Well, yeah, I'll get to Charlie later on, I guess.
Yeah. But before we get to Charlie, let's so like,
and I love that one of the things that I loved with Sally is that Sally has a cat, and I love that she gave Alex a cat, because I have a dog. I'm a dog person through and through. But Alex strikes me as would definitely have a cat. And I'm not sure why. I think it's more of like the strong silent type sort of.
Yeah, she's very independent.
Yeah. and I mean, who does, when Nikki doesn't have Dre, and when he's talking about Dre, he calls Alex. She knows what's up. She's the one who's like, duh. He's like, oh my God, there's all this like emotional tension between us. And Alex is like, duh. Like, how did you not see this before? So Yeah, I thought that was fun. That was fun to play with.
Yeah, I like a lot that the girl in the band is like it's like the most like grounded and down to earth figure and the more like serious one too.
Yeah, I
I
mean, she's
kind
the
of
one who
like that.
actually has her shit together, so to speak.
Yes,
Unlike everybody else, who's just a fucking mess. So
that's true.
yeah,
So we can get to Charlie and okay, so I also really like Charlie. I like that I didn't pick that at the first reading when even at the second reading when I was doing like I guess the review of the first issue I didn't pick that too, but Charlie is also like queer probably he fits with uh, some random dude I don't remember the context I think they were ordering food and he's like this person that comes up as like more healthy for some reason. He's like very extroverted. He's like all of that, but you kind of when the story keeps developing, you realize that he kind of has fear of like being probably alone with his thoughts or probably not sharing something with other people, and that comes later in his arc as addiction and as what is understood as committing suicide at the end of the for well at the end no but in the middle of the last season and generally asked you about the inspiration behind this character because he really grew on me. I thought he was a jerk in the first issue. I yeah, I didn't. I mean, there was like a bestiality joke somewhere that really drove me off. Like I was like, I can't stand this dude. And then
that's
yeah,
so funny. I love that.
and then I was like, I kind of understand him a lot emotionally now. So you did that. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the hard thing with Charlie is that I'm an introvert, you know, like I'm not, I mean, we all know a Charlie, that person who can like party like
yes.
every day and like, you know, drink all the time and be like, yeah, let's party again, you know, and it's like, how do you do that, you know? So that was, it was a challenge writing him. I wanted to, what I wanted to do was that I wanted to make him, um, fun enough that all of his crazy stuff didn't feel like assholeish. Like, you know, when he's like bringing he's like, hey, let's take ecstasy at an ecstasy show, like that's, you know, it's cheesy and it's dumb, but it's also sort of charming, you know, and so it overshadows the fact that it's a really irresponsible thing to do, and that's sort of what Charlie is to me, is that he's crazy. He's always dyeing his hair different colors. You know, he's loud. He's out there. He does, you know, he cracks dirty jokes and he sleeps with everything. um, but I also like he gets them opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise had. Like, I think one of the important things with Charlie is that he's the one who's like, hey, you know, we should put out an ad for a drummer. And Nikki's like, no, it has to be organic. It has to be like a best friend. and Charlie's like, no, dude, let's just put an ad in the paper. And so he does it without telling them. And Nikki's all pissed off. He's like, no, this is not what it was supposed to happen. But that's how they find Alex, is through the ad. So Nikki sort of understands that like some of Charlie's crazy ideas, even though some of them are dangerous, a lot of them are, you know, get them opportunities that they may have not had otherwise. So it's and you know, obviously Charlie takes it too far, and that's one of the dangers of that kind of personality, is in the indulging personality. It's like, I want to indulge in everything. And you know, obviously that doesn't end well for him, because, you know, the once you're on like on drugs like that all the time, or under the influence of everything all the time, it's like you get sort of, well, like you said, you get sort of scared to be alone with your own thoughts.
Yes.
you know, when you're not high or whatever. So that's part of what his downfall really. I mean, is that his he indulges too much and he wants to try everything and he tries too much of it and then it just sort of spirals and crashes. But I think it's really funny that you hated him in the first issue. Because that's so interesting to me because I was trying really hard because I'm not, like I said, I'm not an extrovert, so I was trying really hard to make a likable extroverted character, like somebody who's a nut and just crazy and obnoxious, but also, you know, just so likable that you can't help but, you know, want to hang out with them, you know. So obviously I failed in that first issue, but I'm glad you warmed up to him later on.
Yeah, but yeah, but I feel like it's a success that even if I hated the character in the first issue, when I arrived to the second issue and I started seeing some of the things that happened with him, I actually kind of like identified with him even sometimes more than with Nikki. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
like how the book is doing that to me? Because like that's yeah. Because like
Well,
I
I
feel
mean,
like yeah.
Charlie knows
No,
how to
I
have
feel
fun.
yes, and I feel like there's some part of addiction that people like represent less than it's how it can be seen as fun from the outside, and
Exactly. Yeah.
that really struck me. Like I was reading this, I think it's the second issue. It's a moment when it's like I knew what it was in my last reread like this week, and I knew what was gonna happen at the end. So I was reading it with that in my head, and I was like, this is kind of great that people think he's having so much fun because like to some extent he's not, and yeah, so I think that's great. Like
Well, yeah,
I
and
love Charlie now.
well, I'm glad. I love him too, but so I mean, even though, you know, he was doomed from the start, but so
Yeah.
many people when they tell stories of addiction, it's like, you know, it's like the depressed guy at home who's shooting up heroin is like, oh, my life is alive. It's like, but you know, I mean, people forget that, you know, people get into it because it's fun, you know,
Yes.
and it seems fun. Like I think there's this line in one of my favorite movies, Train Spotting, at the very beginning when Mark Ewan McGregor's character is like, this everyone's like, oh, you're stupid for trying heroin, but he's like, hey, it feels amazing. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't do it. We're not fucking stupid. At least we're not that fucking stupid. like people forget that it's that in like addiction stories that it doesn't start out like tragic and horrible. It starts out as like having fun, but it can become tragic and horrible if you do too much of it. So
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, Charlie is I mean, I guess I can just go ahead and say that he was initially at the outset very, very inspired by Hide, the lead guitarist for X Japan, the one who killed himself. It's just a crazy punk rock, had bright pink hair, like, slept with everything, just everybody assumed he was having so much fun, So that's sort of where that idea came from. That the one where you're like, oh, it's the party animal who's always happy, is that they often are hiding something under all that. So
Yeah. I just remember like something we were talking about earlier, that the novel and the comic were so different at the end, and I'm curious about like the format, because like for people that haven't picked up the book is not only a comic but deals with some interviews and some parts of a diary that I think is from Dre, if I'm not wrong, and some stuff gets mixed up in the middle of the comic that I think is what makes even if the issues are, I don't know, 60, 80 pages long, they read really like fast to me, because it's like they're putting like a lot of things on you, like to get you excited of, like there's fake interviews and all types of stuff. And I wonder if the Dre diaries are kind of part of the novel or something from the novel, because sometimes they feel really novelized. So I was like,
Yeah.
is this
Actually, all of that stuff was part of the novel. That's part
oh
of all the interviews, the press releases, Dre's diary entries. All of it was part of the novel because that was part of what I wanted to, part of how I wanted to like show all sides of this story, like not
yes,
just the one point of view, but I wanted to show everybody's point of view. And sometimes that, sometimes that's the point of view of a random journalist who has nothing in common with his band. He's just interviewing somebody, so. And I've always been a really big fan of multimedia projects like that,
yes,
or like comics that have like bonus material. Like look at something like Watchmen with the bonus, the bonus prose in between, or like another one of my favorite comics, Nowhere Men. It's a comic about science, but like in between the actual comic are like fake interviews and fake advertising and all that kind of thing. And I love that because it feels like it's part of the world building. Like it makes you believe it, it's like this really exists. Like it. So yeah, all that stuff was part of the original novel. And I knew I wanted to keep it in there because it almost works better in a comic format, just throwing
yes,
a bunch of stuff in there that's not necessarily part of the narrative. So, and yeah,
yeah.
sorry,
It makes you
Dre,
understand. Oh, tell me, tell
the
me.
Dre stuff is actually from the novel as well, obviously. Yeah. So
I feel like that makes you understand Dre better, because I feel like a lot of the comic is from Nick's point of view. Like, even if like uh, the stuff that is narrating the story is mostly Nikki for most of it. So I feel like it really those prose parts really makes you understand Dre's point of view and what Dre is dealing with and what are his insecurities with this relationship. So yeah, I feel like it makes for, as you said, trying to show everybody's point of view.
yeah, that was the idea too. Um, and it's it was the same in the book. Nikki's narration was the main thing, but everybody got a little bit of like Charlie's pages in the later issues.
Yes.
Basically take over after Dre's diary entries go away. But those were another thing where I was like, I just want to experiment. I want to play around. I want to show everybody's point of view and everybody's perspective. And so I think singular perspectives are really, really boring.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
this is one of Charlie's pages, right?
yeah.
Yeah. That one is wow.
Yeah. And that well, I mean, I think it works really well with the splash page too, because in the novel it's just text, obviously, but I think with the splash page behind it, it almost makes it more powerful,
Totally. So I think it's time to like pick up from the thing that I wanted to pick up before, which is what I got this like this last time of today, like reviewing the book. I was like really moved by how like kind of it's really sad and really difficult. Like it's not a happy ending, but it's kind of in an uplifting tone, because I mean, Nikki is obviously struggling by the end of the book with his own sentiment of if he is gonna be around, if he's gonna leave, if he wants to leave or not wants to leave, and he's thinking all of that. And I think it's something that a lot of people, and I think especially queer people, think about often. So it's like it's something that you can relate to the book probably if you share some of the themes that we have talked about today. So I think it's really powerful that uh, he really deals with that, because Charlie commits suicide, his father did too, and it kind of connects back with the first issue and what with all the issues he's been having with can process the thing that happened with my father. And by the end, he breaks all his stuff, like the dream you described. Like he
Yeah.
does all these dramatic things, and you don't know how Nikki is gonna end up, and kind of it's kind of the motor for keep reading it. Is like you're worried about him, and I was like personally very worried the first time I read this, like really, like no, but that's good because like you sometimes it's difficult to make that with a comic because you feel like you have the option to just go ahead and skip it, but I couldn't. I was like, no, I have to find out every detail of what is happening, and and by the end, he hears a song in the cafeteria, in the cafes he's in. I think that cafe appears various times because it's kind of the continuing narration, and he hears a song, and the barista is like, you must be a fan, and it's actually his song, and the barista is like, this fan is pretty cool, and he remembers he has like something he's proud of, and in that moment, if it seems like enough for like, okay, I'm gonna decide to keep living, whatever that means, and that's kind of the end of the book, and I think it's such a beautiful ending. Like, I, I'm sorry for spoiling your life, by the way, but
No,
I
no,
think
no.
it's
I'm so glad that the ending worked for you because yeah, that's exactly it. Is that he's so by the end of the book he's so caught up in his own personal drama and his own like you know depression and just like oh my god my life my life my life that he forgets that there's a world outside of that in which ecstasy affected other people like it's not just
yes,
this thing that happened to him, like it happened to everybody. So I think getting that outside perspective was sort of what helped. Like he was like, oh right, like this is something that's in the world. It's not just something I made up in my head. um so yeah, I'm glad the ending worked for you. I was a little nervous because I didn't resolve the relationship between Nikki and Dre,
yeah,
but to me, the major conflict was always Nikki versus himself anyway, because, you
mm,
start with, the trying to understand like why his father would kill himself. And he's like, oh, I don't get it. I don't get it. And then by the end of issue 4, he gets it. He gets it. He's like, oh, okay. But he doesn't do it. So I feel like it was right to end it there, as opposed to like having this big, cheesy reunion thing where Dre's like, I'm gonna divorce my wife and marry you, like that's whatever. You can write fan fiction if you want, but to me it ended where it needed to. So I'm glad you liked it.
yeah. No, I kind of I wouldn't do fan fiction about that because I feel like I kind of understand why the relationship didn't end together. Like, I normally need happy endings for queer people, but in this case, I understood why this might not be the best relationship for both of them. They have like enough of history, and in my head, Nikki, after all of this, like finds experiments more with his sexuality and gender, maybe comes out as non-binary later in life. Like, he's just living his life, and I don't know about you. I didn't think about it.
Yeah, no, neither did I, because there's yeah, because that was the ending. I mean, that was, it it was in the moment, like, he lives, he's alive, and he's going to
Yes.
keep living, whatever that means, whether that means reconciling with Dre, whether it means whatever that means. But the fact that you don't know is what's uplifting about it. I think is that he has a future.
Yes.
He didn't end it. He's gonna do whatever he wants, and I think that's so just underrated in storytelling. Like, because there's so much romanticization of like downward spirals and people who
Yes.
die, and or like they go insane and they kill themselves, or they go insane and whatever, and that's how their life ends. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that kind of story, because there are lots of stories like that I really enjoy. um, but in particular this one, I thought it was important to emphasize that living is the inspirational thing, at least for me. Like, because everyone's, people are like, oh my God, this band and this guy who died and it was, he's a legend. It's like, well, what about the people who are getting old? Like, do they get to be legends or do they just get old? So, I mean, you can't, if you're alive, you're getting old. That's just the way it works, So if you can't be both. You can't be young forever and keep being alive. So there's, you've got to make that decision. And I love it when little rock stars, little musicians, like, they die of old age and they're like 92 and they're like, they had a great life. And it's, it's not as dramatic as going out like by killing yourself, but it's better, like, I don't know. It came from a lot of it came from, I was very bitter really that people just, they put the dead people on a pedestal and they judge everything that the living people do as if it's like the wrong thing, or like, oh, the dead person wouldn't have done this or whatever. And that just really rubs you the wrong way. It's like, no, this person is living, and so they're going to make mistakes and they're going to do bad shit and they're going to do stuff that you don't agree with, but they're alive. That's what matters, So, yeah. Anyway, that's kind of where that came from.
Yeah. No, I love that ending, and I feel like it wouldn't have hit as hard if it would have them reunited, because it would have felt like if he was living for love, and I don't necessarily like that much. So yeah, I prefer that he's living for reasons that make sense within his life, that drive him internally. And not
having
for
a partner
other
isn't
people.
the be all end all of existence. Like, it doesn't have to, a happy
exactly.
ending doesn't have to, consist of finding your true love. I mean, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you just want to live because you want to do shit, and that's cool too. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think I asked you all I wanted to ask, but I don't know if you want to tell anything more that comes to your mind, or
I'm so happy. This is the first time I've been able to like really talk in depth about the story since it was finished. And all this has been in my head forever and ever and ever. And so like I've been telling this story in my head for 20 years. So it feels really good to like get it all out, talking about Charlie and talking about Alex, and just, I don't know. I just feel it's great. It's very cathartic, so to speak.
I'm so glad.
After so much time to be able to talk to somebody who actually read it and knows what I'm talking about, as opposed to me just rambling to people like, oh my God, you have to hear this band, Indie. They sound just like Ecstasy. And the people look at me like, who's Ecstasy? What are you talking about? So yeah, this has been great. It's really cool.
Amazing.
I don't know if there's anything else I need to say. I mean, there will be a trade.
That's great. I'm gonna be able to get a trade, because
yes.
I don't have the single issues in physical, because they're very expensive to send abroad, and as they were coming out, I was like, yeah, no, I can't afford all of that. But if it's a trade, yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah, there's going to be a trade. It's going to be a big hefty thing, because the issues are like 60 pages, so it's going to be big. And I'm hoping to put some extra goodies in there in the back.
Wow.
And yeah, so that'll be good to have it in like that one complete book, and it'll help with the continuity with the story as well, because it was hard not to have Sally be able to finish it, because she brought so much to the characters, and she's awesome. And I mean, she's drawing comics for Peter Milligan now, so she's doing fine. She doesn't even mind. But it was hard to have to finish it without her. But finding Natalie was a total blessing. Like, she just got it. She got it immediately. I didn't even have to refine her character designs or anything. Like she sent me this character page of Nikki and Dre, and I was just like, this is fucking perfect. Like, so it was very serendipitous to find her, and I'm glad we were able to. And DC Hopkins too, the letterer. I mean, God, how awesome is he? Like, I never, I'd get a proof back, and I'd be like, there are no mistakes. There are no typos. What is this? So yeah, he's great too. But I think having it all in one volume will help with that sort of disconnect that I had, Oh God, Natalie killed the last scene too. With the like how she made it look like it was in motion. She sort of warped the pages to make it look like Nikki was moving, and yeah, it was just great stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing because I was like getting to this last issue, and I was like, the art style is very different, but I feel like it fits because like the issue gets very harsh, and it fits like this art is more like it's more trying to be not trying to be but being beautiful than Sally. Sally sometimes is more punk, so I kind of like that this last issue was very beautiful because the end was beautiful, so it kind of connects with that. Like,
oh, that's a cool way to think of it. Yeah. Sally's very punk. I love her, but yeah.
No, I absolutely love her art, but I like the chains.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked for you, because I thought it worked really well too. I was surprised by how well it worked. I was kind of terrified that it wouldn't work, but thanks to Matt Pizzolo and Black Mask, we got it done. We got to the finish line. So
yeah, because it's been like 4 years.
4 years. Yeah. Well, and
part
of that is my fault because I didn't, like I said, I was like, oh, the story's written, I'll just write 60-page issues in no time, and it's like, no, that's not the way it works. So all the delays, I mean, there were a lot of reasons for delays, but one of them was my overconfidence in being able to adapt it. I'm just glad we got here finally, eventually. And even though, the people probably don't even know that it kept going, because people in comics have very short attention span. They'll forget about a book if it misses like a month.
I mean, the trades will help. They'll see a trade, and that will help.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I hope so too. The trade will help, but yeah, I'm just glad it got finished, because I know there are comics that don't get finished. There are comics that, for whatever reason, that.
Oh, I was so scared with this one that it wouldn't get finished, because when I did the review of the parts of the second issue, because I was like very into the book, and I was like, it can't end like this. You can't make
Yeah. I was also afraid that it wouldn't get finished, but it did, and that's what counts. And yay. So the trade, look for it to be solicited soon. I'm not sure, but it hasn't been solicited in previews yet, but
I'll keep my eye on that.
Yeah, please keep your eye out for it, and I'm gonna be pimping the hell out of that trade, because I know some people who don't read comics are like weird about buying single issues of things, because it feels sort of like incomplete, or like, what is this magazine thing that I'm holding, and where do I put it on my bookshelf? So hopefully people who are averse to that kind of single issue will be more willing to pick up a collection. So yeah.
So the last thing is kind of like, what are you working on, or what are you doing now? Because I only asked you about last song here and there, and I didn't ask you about any other of the other stuff, but I'm interested, obviously.
Well, it's gosh, I've been telling this story. I've been telling last song for so long. I forget what else I've been doing. I actually, it's funny that last song ended up being my first complete creator-owned book, because most of what I do is horror and monster related. But then I got the best gig ever that combined the two, horror, monsters, and rock and roll, this year, when I got to write the lead-in story, Succubus story, for Cradle of Filth's anthology comic book series. Maledictus Athenaeum, because they're Cradle of Filth. They can do whatever they want. But yeah, I was able to write the Succubus story, and Metin 3 did the art for that, which was amazing. Like, that was like dream come true. Like, rock and roll, monsters, and Metin 3. Hello. The first print is available on Incendium Online, their website. I'm not sure if there's going to be a previews version, but should you want a physical copy, you can order it through there. And that was a lot of fun because it felt like sort of a continuation of my rock and roll like comic book thing. I have a short story coming out in November in the Ahoy Comics parody anthology, Edgar Allan Poe's Snifter of Death now. It started with Edgar Allan Poe's Snifter of Terror, then it was Edgar Allan Poe's Snifter of Blood, and now it's Edgar Allan Poe's Snifter of Death. It's an ongoing anthology of Poe parodies.
Yeah, I read that one.
yeah, it's really funny. It's really good stuff. And well, I've got the short story in issue 2 of that's coming up in November. I riffed on a very underrated, lesser known story of his. The story is called Angel of the Odd, and I riffed on it and called it Angle of the Odd. But it's so that's coming out in November. I do have a miniseries gestating in my brain, and this will actually be a miniseries, not like the bastardized miniseries that last song was with like 60-page issues. Like this would actually
there's nothing
be
mini
22
about
pages,
it.
4 issues.
You call it mini, but
but this one would be the one that I have in my head right now is it's a much more from my own personal obsessions, whereas last song is very larger than life and was inspired by other things. The miniseries I have in my head is definitely more me and what I grew up with, but I haven't, it's not officially signed onto a publisher yet, so I'm not gonna talk about it.
Okay.
Not anybody's gonna steal my
Yes, because we are live. When we're not live, you can tell me.
Okay, I'll tell you when we're not live. We'll do that. Gosh, let's see. I've got a short story coming out in a Cthulhu anthology riff that Russell Novelty put together, who's a great indie editor and writer. It's called, the anthology series is called Cthulhu is Hard to Spell. This is actually the 3rd volume. And I did a story in there that's a riff on Pickman's Model, which is my favorite Lovecraft story. So it seems when I Patreon, I'm always riffing on old horror authors, but that's the way I pay tribute to them, I guess, is to make fun of them. So yeah, that one's coming out I think the beginning of next year, I think. But yeah, it'll be through Wannabe Press, which is Russell's publisher. It's called Cthulhu is Hard to Spell, Volume 3 Battle Royale. Let's see what else is going on. I mean, that's mostly the gist of it right now. I hope to do more, because the Incendium Cradle of Filth story was sort of a collaboration with heavy metal, and I've like sold my soul to heavy metal. I'm such a huge fan of that brand, so I'm hoping to do more with heavy metal, because everything from the 80s animated film to the magazine, I'm just totally in love with. So hoping to do more of them, but we'll see. And again, heavy metal, keeps with the rock and roll theme. So rock and roll comics and monsters. It's pretty much my brand.
It sounds like a fun brand.
Like a fan brand.
Yeah. So I think we're Donna, thank you so much for coming to
Pleasure.
chat with me.
Thank you for doing this. Like I said, being able to actually talk to somebody who's read the book and interpreted the characters themselves and beyond my own brain, so I'm not like sounding like a crazy lunatic when I talk to people about it, has been really, really cool.
Yeah, I have loved it too. I fell in love so much with the comic that I was like, I need to talk with you about it because like and
that means a
yeah,
lot. Thank you. I think my
and it has
family's freaking sick of hearing about it by now. We're just like, I've been blabbing at my sister about Mickey and his problems for 20 years. She's probably like, thank God, it's done. It's over.
you know, I loved hearing about Nicky and his problems. That's like
Oh, he's endlessly entertaining because even though he's like an angsty emo kid, his heart's in the right
yeah,
place. His heart's in the right place.
relatable. And CMO kid, that was me as a kid.
Yeah. Yeah, the weirdos, you know, sitting on the stairs as opposed to like being in the center of attention. Definitely.
Absolutely.
That was me too. So yeah, thank you. It's been great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for the people that will watch this and etc. and are watching, the link to buying the book is in the description of the videos. And yeah, go check it out. And the trade will come eventually. We'll
probably within a couple of months. Well, within a couple of months, it's going to be solicited soon. I've already and my publisher just confirmed that it's going to be happening. So hopefully that'll be this year.
Yay!
Yay!
So, thank
you so much. I had fun.